Welcome back. We are going to do some bottom end building now. Waiting for lube for those sleeves, which you probably saw in another episode. So I can put those in after the crank's in. It should be fine after checking everything else out. And the way these two popped in, I have no doubts that everything's going to go together well. I should probably lock this from turning. So it's a lot easier to get the lifters in without the crank in the way. So we'll get the lifters in, then get the camshaft in. And I gotta clean the lifters. Generally I don't do at least the final wash on parts until I'm ready to put them together, so they're good and clean. So I'll get on that and then we'll start sticking them in there. The camshaft measured up good, so I didn't do anything to that other than clean it. So kept the lifters in order, and that way they work against the same lobes that they were before in case there's any wear patterns or anything like that. Just took a piece of cardboard, punched some holes in, and put lifters in. That helps keep them organized on the cheap. So I'll wash up number one and then we'll put her in. Oh, I've got this, I like this one for the lifters just because it's almost grease. So it's going to stay in there. Cling on good until the oil gets circulating around in the engine. Maybe I'll put some right there for that initial startup. Now it's all slippery. Next, probably not going to see much, just because I keep getting my hand in the way. So I'll record these first two going in, and then you'll have to take my word for it on the rest, I guess. I'll put a dab on each lifter, and then in on each bearing I'll coat that. Then I'll coat the camshaft before I slide it in. Oh, here is this is the gear that drives the oil pump. I definitely want to make sure that's lubed up ahead of time. It'll be sitting down in there once it's all assembled. I'm going to put lube on every lobe, smear some on the bearing areas. That is in. All lubed up. See where the oil pump goes down in there and meshes with the gear. I'll probably have to slide that back out a little bit to time it to the crank. For those that are new to engines, hopefully there's some of you here that may be trying to learn a thing or two. The camshaft is what opens the valves to let the air in and the exhaust out. Since this is a 4-stroke engine, the cam has to turn half as fast as the crankshaft to keep everything in time. So I got a bigger gear here, crankshaft out of a gear here, and also to keep time there is the letter C, and that matches up with the letter C on the crankshaft. So that's in place. Let's see about taking the crank out of the bag and getting it cleaned up and ready to drop in, and also need to set bearing halves in those parts of the block. I've spun all the main bolts in by hand and took them back out again, just make sure they all turn nice and free. Cam is in. Crank got ground to 20 under, and Larry's Valac down in Texas had a set of new old stock 20 under bearings, you know, from the good old days when stuff was made in the USA. Of course I say that. Let's see what the back of the shell says. Let's see, 20 over Oliver, or no, Clevite. Doesn't say if it's made in the USA. Well, that will be the bottom half because it has no holes in it, which is currently the top half. Looks like they need a little wiping off. So I will number these just to keep the two halves together. We'll plastic gauge them before it's all said and done. Tang there. One more check for any foreign stuff. Even a little speck of dirt can push that bearing up 1/1000th and make it start dragging. Okay, the holes should all line up. They should. Now this has got a counter sink hole, so that'll let oil through there. So that'll be okay. Let's line it up. And there's a hole there, but it goes to nowhere, so that's fine. So I'm gonna write 7 on the back of this one. Keep them paired up. If I was really doing this right, I would measure the bore with a bore gauge and well, mount the bearings in, clamp them down, measure it with a bore gauge, measure the crankshaft, and then the difference is my gap, my tolerance, my space, whatever. There's got to be some space for oil and for it to turn. But I'm gonna lean towards that they knew what they're doing, and we will check it with plastic gauge, which we'll see how that works here in just a moment. Next up is the thrust washer, which wraps around and takes up the end play or the thrust of the crankshaft. It does say upper, which looks like lower because the block's upside down, but Oh, I use this Permatex Ultra Slick for the actual main bearings and rod bearings. It's pretty darn thick and sticky. Used to use engine oil, but I just like this stuff, the whole sticky, staying in there, staying where you put it. It's a little more fluid than that gray stuff that I put on the cam, a little more. So I figure it won't make for harder cranking when I'm first trying to fire it up. It's sticky. That's what we want. Want it to stay in there as long as possible until the oil gets flowing. Gotta get the sides of the thrust bearing. Okay, let's move you guys up out of the way so I can have plenty of room to set that crank in there. And I might as well get the camshaft timed up. There, just had to break that suction. There's the C there. And I missed. And I missed again. That time she lined up. C to C. Oh. C to shining C. All right, now the next process of, as I say, why did the bearings all move, but the thing turned around, of starting to plasti gauge. We will start with the thrust bearing, and then I can check the thrust clearance on that, the end-to-end play before we get any farther. So far, so good. It turns. So clearance is supposed to be 1.5 thousandths to a max of 4.5 thousandths. So I've got red plastic gauge, which goes from 2 thousandths to 6 thousandths. And I guess if that doesn't come out right, we'll throw a green one in there. But what it is, if I can get it open, what it is a piece of plastic. And we're gonna gauge with it. You break a piece off, and you set it in there. I like to run it a little bit of a diagonal, get a little more space. And then, let's see, we need to get the bearing in the cap the right way. So the tang is engaging there. I want to watch the dowel pins, line them up. I'm going to put a little more of that, sticky lube on here. Then we just set it on there and torque it down. And I should have left well enough alone because it stuck to the bearing. What will happen is as that gets clamped down, that plastic will get squished out. Then you just hold this up to it, and however wide it is how much clearance is in there. The tighter the clearance, the more it squishes it down and makes it wider. Pretty simple in concept. So let me grab a couple bolts and look up the torque for that, and we'll get going. A little engine oil on the threads to lubricate those. In an effort to make this a little quicker for now, I will use the good old-fashioned bar. Book says 130 foot-pounds, 129 to, I don't know, something slightly higher than 130, so I'm just going to go for 130. There's 120. 130 there. And 130. Now we go back the other way. See if my torque wrench shows in reverse. It should. That's weird. Seemed like it took just a little bit less. It only took like 120 foot-pounds to break them free. All right, come up. There she goes. You gotta get it off those dowel pins. Almost scraped it off. The camera wasn't pointing the right way. So, assuming you can see it there. And the reason it didn't smash in the middle is there's a channel for the oil that doesn't touch the crank, so that part doesn't get smashed down. But we just take our little here. Yeah, not quite 2 thousandths, just a little over 2 thousandths. That's good, because let's see, 1.5 was the tightest that they recommended, and up to 4.5. But the bigger the gap is, the more the oil can slip out. So you want to keep it to the tighter end of things. So now I got the fun job of fingernail works best because it ain't going to scratch the metal. Peeling that plastic off from there. Cleaning that up. There's some stuck to the bearing too. I saw it when I pulled the cap off. So I'm very happy with that. That clearance. What do I do with my paper towels? Just a little bit left on there. So, got the plastic gauge scraped off from there. It likes to stick to the bearing more than the crank. Took a little bit to get it cleaned off, but I didn't want to damage the bearings, so I just keep working at it. 130. That should be it. Might be just a hair over 130. Maybe we'll try her with a clicker one and see how that comes out. Yeah, it turned just maybe a smidge, maybe not. That one's saying 130. It should turn. There'll be some drag from the sticky oil, but turning nice and smooth. All right, let's check the end play. First I gotta look up and see what that is. Maximum is 11 thousandths. And they like it to be 9.5 thousandths. Let's try the 9. So I can pry it to one way. All I'm doing is shoving this skinny little feeler gauge that's a set width down in there to tell how wide it is. There we go. Let's try 7 thousandths. That's about halfway between the two tolerances. I was a bit concerned about the amount of end play, and so I got checking, and there were 2 different sizes of thrust bearings. Well, obviously more than that, because you could have 3 thousandths under, 10 under, 20 under. These are 20 unders, but the thrust width could be 2 different widths, essentially to give you a second set of bearings in case your crank got a little rough on the thrust surface. You could have that ground. So I decided to put the dial indicator on. Let me get the screwdriver. The cap's off now, so it might go a little farther, but which direction am I going? It's already forward. So we're looking at about 16 thousandths there. Oop. Well, I guess it's a little more than that. Zero that baby out. And I might be getting just a hair more without that top or that bottom shell in there to control it as much. But I'll put this in here and push her forward. Yeah, I'm getting more now with the cap off than I was before. I should have recorded then. But I was getting about 16 thousandths right on the money if I really push. Yeah, it's actually just about I guess I shouldn't try to force it so much. Or put the cap back on for demonstration purposes. But this is why we check these things. Yeah, without pushing it too hard, yeah, I get to about 16 thousandths. Somewhere in there, which is not acceptable. They say 11 thousandths max. So I break out the, let's see, trying to do this with too many hands, or not enough hands. My old thrust bearing, I'm glad I kept it. It's coming in at about 1.496. And this is supposed to be the over width. I don't know. So the box is marked right. The 33, wait a minute, 310, is that 310 or 300? 9984 is supposed to have the wider face. And this one's just coming in at 1.498. And if we look up on AGCO's website, we've got the 20 undersize, which is 1.495 to 1.498. So my old one wasn't too bad a shape. And the new one there that is supposed to be 512 to 515 is definitely not it, because there's my part number, 3310 9984. And what I do with the box. So I'm not blaming Larry on this. I think someone switched it on him because, oh, this is the new one, and it has looks like a date stamped in it of 01 of 16, which would put it a lot newer than that box. It also doesn't have the Oliver White part number stamped into it, which all the others do. So here's the old one. That's got the part number stamped into the back side. So I think at some point someone borrowed them out of that box and put them back in. It's the right bearing if the crank was ground for the narrower width. Obviously my crank shop went with this wider number. Fortunately, I have been able to locate another set. So I am going to order those. But that pretty much grinds my engine building to a halt. I ain't got the lube to put the other sleeves in. That should hopefully be in today. It'll probably be Friday. If I order, what's today? Tuesday. I might have them by Thursday, this bearing. There's plenty of other stuff to work on, but this engine just seems to slow down. But this is why we check those specifications. I'm glad I did. Take it for granted and just throw everything together, and you find out where someone slipped something different into a box. So yeah, if this is coming in 16 thousandths, 17 thousandths maybe, and we add that thicker one on, she should be pretty good. Let's see. Oop, I turned it. Now really getting it over there puts it almost to 20. That was what, 5.1 something, 5.12 to 5.15. So 498 to 5.15. That's 17 thousandths. Yeah, that's going to get her right back down to a couple thousandths, which is the tighter end of where they want the thrust, but is acceptable. So that's a bummer. No harm, just a delay. This is, like I say, this is why we check these things. Maybe I'll clamp that back down real quick just to double check it with the top on. Hold on. Okay, cap is tightened down. Take it easy, go. Yeah, that way. Yeah, I'm getting about 17 and a half. So yeah, that's gonna put her about 2.5 thousandths with the right bearing in it, which is, let's check the book. Crankshaft, main bearing, crankshaft, end play. Oh no, they want at least 4 thousandths. I guess it depends. If it's wide at the 15, if it's 512, then we're only talking another 14 thousandths. Yeah, if I hold a little pressure against it, yeah, it's about 17 and a half. Let's go back the other way, hold a little pressure. Look at that, I already knocked it off. Maybe I better mount that a little better. So yeah, I had a loose nut there on the back of the dial indicator. My bad. But pretty much 18 thousandths. So depending on how that new thrust comes in, its tolerance is, it should be about right. It could be just a skosh tight. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Never a dull moment. Well, at least it's to the, you know, if it's tight, we can grind a little more off. When it's loose, that's a little tougher to put it back. The new bearings came, replacement bearings came. Let's see what it measures up at. 515. The upper end of it. That could be tight. Yeah, this one's at 515 as well. Which, you know, they're supposed to be a match set, so that's good. Then there was the older 156-630AA. Even came in a nice Oliver box. They're that new old stock. About the biggest difference I could see is these have the brass, bronze, copper, or whatever face for the thrust face. So that's probably the biggest difference between them, is the facing material was updated. Let's see what the width is on this. Yeah, this is coming right in at 515 as well. So I guess the proof is in the pudding. I will put it in, but I have a feeling that's going to be just a little tight on the tolerance, which is a pain in the butt, because then I'll probably have to send the crank out and get it ground. But ain't no point in doing that until we put it in there and actually see. At least it turns with that thrust. Granted, there ain't a cap on, but oh, where'd my C marker go? Get a thrust cap on there and we'll start checking some tolerance. Click. Probably should, well, let's say, probably should put some plastic gauge in at the same time, but first thing I'm going to do is check the end thrust. So, well, it's not so tight that it can't turn. That's a good sign. It's a good start. I'll start with a feeler gauge. Okay, 4.5 thousandths is its minimum. There's 5 thousandths. Let's see, we want to go this way. Oops. Boy, it's just going down in there at 5. I think we're going to have a winner. We'll set up the dial indicator just to be safe. Boy, I'm only getting about 2 thousandths on the dial. I mean, that's still clearance, but it's tighter than they call for. The obvious thing would be to send the crank in and get a couple thousandths ground off. Probably 3 thousandths just to be safe. That'd put well in the range. So yeah, it's barely 2. I think I'm gonna call my machinist and see what his opinion is. Well, I got off the phone with the machine shop guy, and I was kind of thinking this, and he affirmed it, that essentially I need to lap the thrust bearing. This is an old one, but get a good flat surface and basically just try to knock a couple thousandths off. And I'm sure some of you are going to be loving that one, but he said the biggest thing is when he didn't grind cranks, but the guy that used to grind my cranks and did a fantastic job and unfortunately is no longer with us, he said what he'd do is they touch the crank and then go over and hit the thrust faces and then do the journal. He said, so if we took it back in just to try to get like 3 thousandths knocked off, it probably would do damage to the face of the crankshaft, and then they might have to regrind it and go to 30 thousandths under. And he's done this trick before on a foreign engine that they couldn't get the right bearings for, or the tolerances were real close, just needed a couple of thousandths extra, and it worked fine. And that's what the old timer crankshaft guy recommended. Just the way things are done, he said it was better to try to knock a little bit off from that thrust face than try to knock a little bit more off the crank. So that's what I'm gonna do, and you can well, you can argue about it in the comments. So now I got to find a good flat block to do this with, and at least I got a good set of calipers where I can keep measuring it rather than sticking it back in and out. So I need to get it, let's see, we're at 2 thousandths. I need to knock probably 3 thousandths off to be really safe. So if I get it back to that 0.512, which is the 1.512, the minimum tolerance for the width on it that'll get me another 3 thousandths plus the 2, that'll get me up to 5, which is the minimum. It must be my feeler gauge just wasn't going in very deep. It was starting at the top, but I think the thrust face is down a little bit deeper. He also recommended using the one with the bronze face just because that's tougher than the style that I put in there, the Oliver one in the Oliver box. So off to sanding I go. So I have identified them. This one will be the cap side, so that makes this side the front. This one will be the block side. That one's the front. So I'm going to work on the front on both of them. And that way I don't have to worry about, did I take more off from one on one side than the other? You know, so plus the back side is what's going to take most of the thrust every time you push on the clutch pedal. So leave as much meat back there as possible. Check my bench top here. It's good and flat and solid. So from there, I'm just going to make a figure 8 pattern and keep working at it. Figure 8 pattern kind of helps make sure I'm not favoring one area or whatever. And I guess the upside is there are more of these wide thrust 20 under bearings where I got this one. Whoa, he's right. It doesn't take long to take off a couple thousandths. That's 511. Thought this was going to take longer. Yeah, I must have had that in a notch. 512, so it could use a little more off. But yeah, that ain't taking long at all. Try to knock just a little more off, and then I've got the 1000 grit. A little bit smoother to polish it up a little finer, but it's really not doing her too bad. Okay, I got this one to 510. So I got a little carried away. I was going for 511, but that still leaves me plenty. And it seems to be consistent. Yeah, 510 there. 510 there. Oops. There we go. 510 there. So I think that one's good. Here's the block half, front this way. Let's check it again. Yep, 515. So we want to knock this one down to 510. Well, that didn't take long. They are now 1.510 wide, and making sure they're consistently, you wouldn't want, you know, wide here and narrow here. It's gonna put all the thrust in one spot. They seem to be pretty darn consistent. Well, so I guess now the thing is to put them in the block and see how they measure up with the dial indicator. That went quicker than I thought it would. Okay, hopefully this is the last time this crank goes in. Let's see how close I hit the timing mark. First try for the third time or more. Well, let's get that cap on and tighten her down, and then we'll check her with the dial indicator. I think I nailed it. It's like about 5.5 thousandths. Yeah, it takes it back to 0. Minimum of 4.5, maximum of 9, or the range of 9, and the very maximum is 11 thousandths. So I would say 5.5 gives us enough room for expansion and oil, but not so loose to let too much oil go by. Call me satisfied, and argue about it in the comments if you have to. Now I need to plastic gauge. That'll probably be the next thing. It turns smooth, so I think it's going to come out, but plastic gauge that and make sure the other tolerance is right on it. I'd say that's just a little wider than the 3 thousandths mark. Not as wide as the 2. So somewhere between And it's a little diagonal. A little between 2 and 3. And what did I say the spec was? Engine. B. Correcting rod bearings. Oh, no, that's connecting rods. Crankshaft main bearings. Running clearance. 1.5 to 4.5. So that's well within the tolerance, and not towards the loose side either. Probably somewhere up in the 2.8 range. I don't know. Less than 3, definitely more than 2. So 2 and something. So yes, excellent. Hopefully this is showing that. 0015 to 0045. Well, that seems like a good point to go get some lunch. It's finally starting to go my way again. I probably shouldn't jinx it. The ice maker probably stopped working again or something. Well, we're gonna try out my new torque tool thing. Actually, I've had this for a little bit. I think I have used it before, but I know I've used the 3/8 one. Okay, this is with the good old bendy bar type. I'll try to get as close to 130 as I can. That should be about it. Then I have this baby. I got it set for 130. It should show me as it's coming up. 120, 126, 129, 130. It felt like it moved ever so slightly. So I would say the other one was pretty much on. I'll see if I can get it facing you guys. Yep, it shows me I hit 130.1. And then I think I have to hit power to clear it off. All right. She starts going up. I get close. When it stops beeping, yeah, I got 130.3 that time. Felt like it moved ever so slightly, so go. I like that. We'll hit her with a clicker one just to see how close that is. Well, it didn't move. Yeah, if I pull on her just a little extra, it moved just a skosh, so I'd say they're all pretty accurate. They're all giving me the same reading. But I'm going to use that digital one because I like it. Got to 132.5 on that. I think it works both ways. Got this plastic gauge in there. Let's see how much torque it takes to loosen it up. Not as much as it takes to tighten it. Or does it read? Yeah, it reads either way. 111.2 foot-pounds was the max. That's interesting. Looking pretty good on the plastic gauge again. Oops, that's the metric side. And that one's up around 2 thousandths. Same over there. But they want a minimum of 1.5, so we're still good. What I hit, 132. Okay, we'll just keep working. I'll probably go from the front to the back now. Well, let's see. Those two bearings came in right between the 2 and 3 thousandths like the others. So after each one's in, I kind of like to just rotate it 180, or I'm sorry, 360 degrees. Complete revolution on the crank. And if it feels like there's like a spot that's turning a little harder or something, if it wasn't doing it before and you put in another bearing, you probably know which one it is. Whereas if you wait to the end and it feels like there's a tough spot, then you got to start working backwards, and it's turning nice and smooth. Taking a little more effort. I got 4 mains on and this thick lube, assembly lube on there, so that causes some drag, but it doesn't take a lot of effort. So it's starting to look good. Finally. Jinx. I'll just double check all of these just to be sure. The crank is in. Let's give it another spin and see if there's any drag in any spots. And no. Turns nicely the whole 360 degrees. So that is together and ready. That was a bit of a challenge, but now I can move on to the next part, dropping in the pistons and rods and everything, and starting to check those out. Guess this will be the end of this part. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you pulled your hair out. Maybe you're writing a nasty gram in the comments right now. But I do appreciate you watching, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks again.